Ladies and gents, welcome to Spooky Month. Plant yourselves in those seats because we got a movie that'll leave you laughing. It branches out from typical horror movies to something a little greener. This one is a real grass act. I mean, I'm so excited, I wet my plants. Ah! This is 1960's Little Shop of Horrors. We start with Reese's Peanut Butter Cups? It moves on to an incredibly detailed matte painting with a prologue by a hard-bitten cop that really sounds broken up over his experience.
The most terrifying period in the history of my beat began in a little run-down flower shop called Mushnick's.
Poor Mrs. Shiva has come to Mushnick's Flowers looking for a funeral bouquet to honor one of her many lost relatives, while Seymour sings an appropriate tune.
Should all acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind?
You know, he kinda sings like crap, but
he's a nice boy.
Later, the local pain-loving dentist gives his plan order to Mr. Mushnick, who in turn lays it out as clearly as possible to Seymour.
You take 2 gladiolas. You'll cut them nice and even. You'll take 1 coin, you'll wrap them in a package, and you'll take them to Dr. Farr,
who proceeds to take it and literally cut it to shreds. In the meantime, we're introduced to a man who likes his carnations a little salty. And he's got a great philosophy about food.
Don't knock it until you try it, huh?
Seymour shows off his work, which leads to his firing by Mr. Mushnick. Audrey tries to lend a hand.
Why don't you give him a chance to resurrect himself?
I'd give him a chance to quit.
Which makes Seymour bring up a new plant he's been working on. After a bit of wordplay...
See?
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 What is this, a tango?
He's so excited to show off his new plant that he trips over a chair and then a bucket. We then get to meet his mom, who loves snake oil.
Oh, I can feel that surge of warm health going through me already.
And wearing a fancy necklace with a hospital gown. There's a proper introduction to the hybrid.
I named it Audrey Jr.
The flower eater follows that up with the necessary exposition, and what I'm sure is the nicest compliment Mushnick's Flowers has ever gotten.
Crazy about kosher flowers.
Audrey Jr. isn't doing too well, so Seymour gives it a pep talk.
Please don't die.
And he finds out the secret to his plant's heart, which leaves him just a little bit judgy.
I guess there's just no accounting for people's taste.
Audrey Jr. has a massive growth spurt and says its first words.
Feed me.
Followed by some sassy words.
Feed me.
Followed by an impression of a Valley Girl.
Feed me more.
All this drives Seymour to go on the hunt for food. But he just ends up throwing rocks down at the railroad yards, and one leads to a rather unexpected outcome. That means a meal for Audrey Jr., and the revelation that in the 60s, apparently a whole-ass human body could fit in a burlap sack. Audrey eats like a king, feasting on a size 11 foot that's as big as it is. The next day, Seymour finds out that the dentist isn't happy with his floral order, and this results in the first dental duel in cinema history. Incredibly, Seymour manages to off him with this stunning use of a drill. Suddenly, in the waiting room, Jack Nicholson appears. Seymour stands in since the dentist is unavailable, and we get a sample of Jack doing some prep work for his Joker role. He DoorDashes the dentist to Audrey Jr. while making a profound statement.
I never meant to kill anybody in my whole life. I've killed 2 in the last 2 days.
Audrey, in turn, gives its approval. We then arrive at the romantic section of the movie, a blooming romance for Audrey and Seymour, but the unspoken understanding between the cops investigating the murders is pretty amazing too.
Dennis, Farb,
Dead?
missing.
Clothes?
Blood in office.
Where?
Skid Row.
Ideas?
None.
We get another scene showing off how awesome Dick Miller is, and then it's off to Seymour's mom's house for dinner, which includes Dr. Flem's cough syrup, cod liver oil with sulfur powder, and Chinese herb chow mein. Audrey's reply is remarkably polite.
Sure smells different.
Audrey Jr. isn't as polite.
You look fat enough.
But at least it eats a robber. Apparently the robber wasn't filling enough, cause Audrey Jr. sends Seymour for takeout. Weirdly, the takeout finds him, and she's got skills to show up wherever he's going. He ultimately flips a rock to decide what to do, but it has some really unexpected results. Later, at a ceremony celebrating Audrey Jr., blooms open up to show off the people it's eaten, and they're pretty solid likenesses given that a plant made them. Seymour responds about how you'd expect.
I didn't mean it! I didn't mean it!
And we go on an exciting chase with an ever-growing posse through a tire plant and a bathroom fixture yard. Mushnick offers what seems like good insight.
You wouldn't find him here with the toilets. Let's go back.
It turns out that Seymour is a cheeky bastard who picked the one place Mushnick wouldn't look. He decides enough is enough and takes on Audrey Jr. from the inside. A bunch of folks show up to see the final bloom open.
I didn't mean it.
Poor Seymour. So Little Shop of Horrors was filmed in 2.5 days on a budget of roughly $30,000. Director Roger Corman was given access to the sets from his previous film, A Bucket of Blood, for use before they were torn down. There were rumors that the 2-day shooting schedule was because of a bet, but more likely it was an incoming law that required producers to pay actors residuals for future releases of their work. After the lower box office performance of Bucket of Blood, Corman and scriptwriter Charles Griffith worked through a variety of ideas, including Cardula, a tale featuring a vampire music critic, and Gluttony, a harrowing tale of a salad chef who wound up cooking customers. This turned into the idea of a man-eating plant. Most of the actors were Corman regulars, but the dentist and Seymour's mum were played by Griffith's father and grandma respectively. A large group of kids were paid 5 cents apiece to run out of a subway exit, and winos were paid 10 cents apiece to be extras throughout the film. Most notably, Jack Nicholson also appeared in one of his earliest roles. And years later, his presence brought the movie wider notice. Dick Miller, known from several Corman flicks, was offered the role of Seymour, but chose to go with the flower-eating customer instead. And yeah, he did actually eat a wide range of carnations. The film score was originally written for Bucket of Blood, but ended up being used for a total of 7 movies, including Little Shop, The Wasp Woman, and Creature from the Haunted Sea. To save on time, Corman shot in a TV sitcom-style setup, using 2 camera crews to capture the action, and most scenes only got 1 take. Charles Griffith provided the voice of Audrey Jr. as a reference for on-camera talent. The voice was supposed to be dubbed by another actor in post, but since Griffith's lines got laughs, and the fact Roger Corman was notoriously cheap, his voice remained. But it was screened non-competitively at the Cannes Film Fest and ended up as the B movie for Black Sunday and The Last Woman on Earth. Corman didn't believe it had much of a financial future, so he didn't copyright it, leading it to become public domain. Interest grew through the 60s and 70s, leading to the eventual musical adaptation and the much more well-known 80s film. There's also a single-season cartoon and a 3-issue comic book. I'm sad to say I didn't see the 60s Little Shop until years after the 80s musical and even the stage version, and I won't lie. The differences can be jarring if you're unprepared. The idea that this weird little low-budget film with a flower-eating customer and a hypochondriac mother was the basis for one of my favorite musicals was a little difficult to come to terms with. I'll be honest, my first watch of this was spent trying to understand what it was more than actually enjoying it. Once I got that out of my system though, I found such a love for this crazy little movie. If you pay attention, the wordplay is unexpectedly fun, and the one-liners hit you from all over the place. Corman couldn't have guessed what would have grown from this. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about low-budget movies. Every now and again, amazing things come along from the tiniest seeds. And watching the 80s musical after seeing this, you can see all these little nods to the original version, including poor Mrs. Shiva. It does such an amazing job of taking story beats from the original, but doing their own thing with it. Modern producers could probably take some pages from their book on how to do a remake right. The 60s Little Shop of Horrors is absolutely worth a watch. Just don't go in expecting what you get in the 80s version, because you will be doing yourself a disservice. This is definitely its own thing, and it's best to go in remembering that. So what do you think? Suggestions for movies, trivial questions, comments, ratings, and some recipes for edible carnations would be appreciated. Thank you so very much for watching.